India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Italy to attend the G20 summit. In a message to world leaders ahead of the summit, Prime Minister Modi said that the focus must be on the pandemic recovery, climate fight, and tackling cross-border terrorism. Prime Minister Modi's visit comes at a time when the world is looking to India to set an example in sustainable and speedy pandemic recovery. According to the IMF, India will remain the fastest growing economy in the post-pandemic world. The G20 this year has gained special significance, and the meet comes at a time when global economies are struggling with unemployment, hunger, and supply chain crisis crippling the world. On day one of his visit to Italy, Prime Minister Modi held bilateral meetings with Charles Michel, the President of the European Council, and Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. The leaders discussed ways to enhance economic as well as people-to-people linkages aimed at creating a better planet. The Indian Prime Minister also paid tribute to Mahatma Gandhi at the Piazza Gandhi in Rome. He also interacted with the Indian diaspora in Rome. He will later hold a bilateral with the Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi. Now, Prime Minister Modi will also visit the Vatican City to call on Pope Francis. Ahead of his visit, Prime Minister Modi said, and I quote, "This will be the first in-person summit of the G20 since the outbreak of the pandemic in 2020 and will allow us to take stock of the current global situation and exchange ideas on how the G20 can be an engine for strengthening economic resilience and building back inclusively and sustainably from the pandemic," unquote. India's Foreign Ministry also said that Prime Minister Modi at the G20 will also remind the world leaders to focus on tackling cross-border terrorism and terror financing.
The G20 agenda, of course, is an economic oriented agenda. It is important that the issue of terrorist financing, etc., is addressed. But as I said, what is important is to see how issues like corruption, money laundering, tax evasion, these are issues where G20 is most active, and we will certainly be active there. But we will not be running short, we will not be falling short in any way on raising issues that are important to us, whether it is the issue of cross-border terrorism, whether it is the issue of terrorist financing, or any other terrorism-related issues that impact on the international community.
On the sidelines of the G20 summit, the Prime Minister will meet several European leaders, including France's President Emmanuel Macron. The in-person meeting with the French President comes as a part of high-level exchanges between the two, including the telephonic conversation in September after the AUKUS pact that miffed Paris. India and France are aiming to strengthen their strategic partnership in the Indo-Pacific region. Prime Minister Modi's other key engagements include bilateral meetings with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, a pull-aside with the Spanish Prime Minister, and meetings with the Indonesian President and Prime Minister of Singapore. After the G20 summit, Prime Minister Modi will also attend the COP26 in Glasgow, UK, where he is expected to highlight India's track record in the fight against climate change and transition to renewable energy. Now joining us live on this broadcast for more is our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal. Good evening to you, Siddhant. Now, we expect that Prime Minister Modi at this G20 will discuss with the world leaders the importance of focusing on tackling cross-border terrorism and terror financing. Take us through some of the details here.
Well, Alison, when it comes to the issues like terrorism or when it comes to the issue of black money, this has been India's stance for a long time now. In fact, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, at his first G20 summit, which he attended in 2014 in Australia's Brisbane, he gave proposals on fighting the issue of black money. But here in Rome, the city, of course, is geared up for the big summit, the two-day summit that will begin tomorrow morning, and we'll see leaders engaging with each other at a time when we know that there are a number of issues. West the COVID crisis, its economic impact or it is the issue of Afghanistan. In fact, if we understand G20, it originated after 2008 financial crisis, and since then it has been meeting annually. But increasingly, it has been taking the role of a grouping which takes care of other issues as well, which are non-economic non-economic in terms of the crisis which we saw in 2008. Last year, the Indian side requested, the Indian Prime Minister requested the Saudi Arabia, which was the host last year, to hold meetings on COVID crisis, and there were indeed 2 emergency meetings, and there were decisive actions taken by G20 grouping. Earlier this month, in fact, there was a meeting on Afghanistan. So increasingly, we are seeing G20 playing an important role amidst a dysfunctional United Nations, a missing United Nations, and that is why the meeting that will take place over the weekend will be very, very important in terms of how consensus can be formed on issues which we have been talking about, but particularly one issue, that is the issue of climate change, given that this meeting is coming just before the Glasgow climate meeting, and this can be in a sense a stepping stone for the larger climate meet which happens in Glasgow, United Kingdom.
Absolutely, Siddhant. And on that, the COP26 summit coming up, India as an example in moving towards a sustainable future. What are some of the big moves that India is making in this area that Prime Minister Modi is expected to discuss?
Well, one thing India has been focusing on is on the renewables, on making sure that renewable share in the larger power share is increased, and for that India has made major commitments. Other than that, it is when it comes to the International Solar Alliance, the proposal was given by the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi way back in 2015 at the Paris Climate Summit, and since then it has taken off. It is the first international organization based out of India, and more countries are participating in it. In fact, Israel has been the latest entrant to the International Solar Alliance. So largely the Indian side will be focusing on these issues, but there are divisive issues as well over climate financing, something that developing countries want from the developed world, and also in terms of commitments by the developed world in fighting the issue of climate change. And we have seen the consensus has been largely missing, and already there has been major impacts in terms of climate change, whether it's here in Italy. Southern Italy is facing a lot of climate related activities in terms of storms because of the storm systems in Mediterranean. Back home in India as well, we have seen a lot of cyclonic activities, increased cyclonic activities in Bay of Bengal. So largely these will be the key issue at the climate meeting, but do remember that these forums do provide the Indian Prime Minister to have bilaterals with his various counterparts. And in terms of Glasgow, what is significant that he's meeting 3 new leaders, the Nepali Prime Minister, the Israeli Prime Minister, and the Japanese Prime Minister. All 3 leaders are new in terms of their prime ministership, and it will provide the Indian side to increase their engagement with these 3 countries, all of which are very important for India. And India, of course, have a special relationship with Tokyo, Kathmandu, and of course with Israel.
Absolutely, Siddhant. Thank you very much for keeping us on top of all the latest coming out of the G20.
We are now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.